The night had that strange stillness before a storm breaks, when the air feels heavy, charged, and full of secrets. Amara pulled her jacket tighter as she walked down the side street near her apartment, humming softly to distract herself from the echo of her own footsteps. She had just finished a double shift at the hospital and wanted nothing more than a hot shower and the comfort of her couch. But the quiet was shattered by the screech of tires, the sound of metal grinding, and then, a sharp, heart-stopping crash. Her head snapped toward the intersection up ahead. For a moment, she saw nothing but the shimmer of rain on the asphalt. Then, out of the darkness, came a wisp of smoke and the faint, panicked flash of hazard lights. Instinct kicked in before fear had a chance to speak. She dropped her bag, yanked out her phone to dial 911, and sprinted toward the wreck. The car had slammed into a lamppost, its front crushed in like paper. Steam and smoke poured out of the hood, mingling with the rain that was now falling harder by the second. "Hello, can you hear me?" she shouted, her voice trembling as she reached the driver's side. Through the cracked window, she saw a young woman slumped against the airbag, her hair stuck to her face, her lips moving but no sound coming out. Amara tugged at the door handle. It didn't budge. She kicked it once, twice, a third time until something in her ankle screamed in protest. The door stayed jammed. She glanced through the shattered glass and saw the woman's swollen belly. A surge of panic hit her. "Oh God, you're pregnant," Amara whispered. Okay, stay calm." She looked around wildly and spotted a fallen piece of metal, part of a street sign. Wrapping her sleeve around her hand, she used it to knock out the rest of the glass. Shards rained down like ice. "Don't move, sweetheart, I'm coming in," she said, lowering herself carefully through the broken window. Her palms scraped against sharp edges, but she didn't stop. Inside, the smell of gasoline was thick, mixed with the metallic tang of blood. The woman's eyes fluttered open for a moment. "My baby," she gasped weakly. "Please, my baby." Amara brushed damp hair from her face. Hey, look at me. I'm a nurse, okay? You're going to be all right. I just need you to stay awake for me." She reached down and pressed 2 fingers to the woman's neck. Pulse was there, faint but steady. She checked the abdomen. Tight, trembling. Contractions. The baby was coming. Outside, distant sirens began to wail, but they felt impossibly far away. The rain poured harder, pounding on the roof like a drum. "Listen," Amara said, her voice trembling but firm. "We're not waiting for anyone. You're going to breathe with me, all right? In through your nose, out through your mouth." The woman tried, shuddering, coughing, then nodded faintly. Amara grabbed her scarf, a bright yellow piece she'd bought at a thrift shop, and tore it into strips, using one to tie around a bleeding arm and another to wipe the woman's face. The engine hissed and popped. Every sound made her heart race. She had no idea how stable the car was, whether it might burst into flames. The woman's hand clutched hers suddenly, strong despite the pain. "Please don't let me lose her," she whispered. "She's all I have." Amara swallowed the lump in her throat. "You're not losing her. Not tonight." She squeezed back, her own tears mixing with the rain. "What's your name?" "Claire," came the faint reply. "Okay, Claire. My name's Amara. We're in this together." Claire's body tensed as another contraction hit. She cried out, gripping Amara's arm. Amara counted her through it, keeping her voice calm, steady, the same tone she used with terrified patience in the "That's it. Breathe. You're doing so good." The flashing lights grew closer now, painting the wet street red and blue. Amara heard shouting. Firefighters, paramedics. Relief nearly knocked her over. "We're here," she screamed through the broken window. "She's pregnant." Contractions started, possible internal bleeding. Hands reached in to pull her out, but Amara refused to move until she saw Claire lifted safely onto the stretcher. Only then did she let herself collapse onto the wet pavement, chest heaving, hands shaking. She realized her scarf, once bright yellow, was soaked red. As the ambulance doors closed, Claire's eyes met hers one last time. She mouthed a silent thank you before disappearing behind the flashing lights. Amara stood there in the rain, drenched and trembling, feeling the weight of adrenaline drain from her body. For the first time that night, she noticed her reflection in a puddle, blood, rain, exhaustion, and a strange, fierce calm in her eyes. She didn't know who the woman was, or whose child she'd just helped save. All she knew was that she couldn't have walked away. Not when someone needed her. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the sky. The storm had broken, but Amara had already weathered the worst of it. Hours passed before Amara realized how numb her body had become. The hospital waiting room was nearly empty, humming with the soft buzz of fluorescent lights and the quiet rhythm of machines beyond the double doors. Her clothes clung to her, still damp from the rain, and her hands smelled faintly of antiseptic and smoke. She sat on a cracked vinyl chair, staring blankly at the clock above the reception desk. Every tick seemed louder than the last. She had given her statement to the police, spoken with the paramedics, and then waited, because she couldn't bring herself to leave. She didn't even know the woman's full name. Claire. That was all. Claire, who had been so afraid, clutching Amara's hand and whispering prayers through the pain. Amara replayed it again and again in her head, wondering if she could have done more, sooner, better. Nurses often carried that weight, tiny questions that haunted long after the adrenaline faded. The automatic doors slid open, and a man stepped in. He looked out of place in the gray-lit hospital, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a dark suit that was drenched through. Water dripped from his hair onto the polished floor as he looked around, his movements sharp, desperate. When his eyes landed on the nurse's station, he almost ran to it. "Claire Cole," he said breathlessly. "Where is she?" "She was in a car accident. Pregnant, 7 months. Please tell me she's here." The receptionist nodded quickly. "She's in surgery, sir. Please wait." But he was already moving toward the corridor, stopped only by a doctor stepping in his path. They spoke too quietly for Amara to hear, but the moment the doctor placed a hand on his shoulder, the man's posture crumbled. His knees nearly gave out before he caught himself against the wall. That was the posture of a man breaking. Amara rose without thinking. She didn't know why. Perhaps some instinct, the same one that had driven her toward the crash. He turned suddenly, noticing her for the first time. His eyes, blue, raw with grief, met hers. He began, his voice hoarse. "You were with her, weren't you?" She hesitated. Yes, I found her. I stayed until the ambulance came." He took a step closer, studying her as if trying to piece together the story from her face. "They said, you got her out of the car. That you helped until they arrived." Amara nodded. She was conscious for most of it. Stronger than she thought. For a long moment, he didn't speak. The tension in his jaw eased, and his shoulders dropped. When he finally exhaled, it was like he'd been holding his breath for hours. "You saved her," he said quietly. "You saved both of them." "I just did what anyone would have done," she replied, though the words felt hollow. She knew not everyone would have stopped that night. The man gave a small, disbelieving laugh. "You'd be surprised how few people would." He rubbed his hand over his face, then extended it. "I'm Ethan. Ethan Cole." The name stirred a flicker of recognition. She'd heard it before. On television, in glossy magazine profiles, attached to photos of billion-dollar foundations and charity galas. But the man standing in front of her now didn't look like a headline. His tie was loose, his knuckles scraped, his eyes rimmed red. For the first time, Amara saw not the figure the world knew, but a man terrified of losing the woman he loved. He sank into the chair beside her, elbows resting on his knees. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. Rain lashed against the windows, and the faint cry of a newborn drifted from another wing of the hospital. The sound made Ethan lift his head, hope flickering in his expression, only to fade again when he realized it wasn't theirs. "She was on her way to meet me," he murmured. "I was supposed to pick her up. She called me right before it happened, said she was running late. If I'd just..." His voice cracked. "If I'd just gone myself." Amara shook her head gently. "You can't think like that. None of this was your fault." He looked at her, eyes shining. "Maybe. But I keep wondering what would have happened if you hadn't been there. If you hadn't stopped." She shrugged, feeling her throat tighten. "I wasn't supposed to be there either. I was walking home. Just right place, right time, I guess." Something in her calm steadiness seemed to steady him, too. The chaos in his face softened, replaced by a quiet awe. "You risked your life for someone you didn't even know," he said. "You didn't even hesitate." "That's what we do," she said simply. We help. The doctor reappeared at that moment, and both of them stood. Ethan gripped Amara's hand without realizing it, as if afraid to face the news alone. The doctor's tired smile said everything. She's stable, he said. Both mother and baby are going to be all right. Ethan's knees nearly buckled. His breath came out in a ragged sob as he pressed a trembling hand over his mouth. Amara looked away, giving him space, but he turned to her instead, eyes full of tears. I don't know how to thank you, he whispered. You saved my family. Whatever you want. Anything, it's yours. She hesitated, unsure how to respond. Gratitude like his was too big, too raw, to answer with words. Finally, she said softly, you don't owe me anything, Mr. Cole. Just be there for them. That's enough. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded, as if those words had reached something deep inside him. When the nurse came to tell him he could see his wife, Ethan turned back one last time. You'll stay, won't you? Amara smiled faintly, for a little while, and as he walked toward the recovery room, she sat back down, the storm outside finally beginning to fade. The next morning dawned pale and quiet, the city still glistening from the night's rain. Amara stood in front of the hospital window, watching the world stir awake. She hadn't gone home. A nurse had found her dozing upright in a waiting chair, exhaustion etched into every line of her face. When she finally washed up in the restroom, her reflection startled her, eyes red-rimmed, hair frizzed from the damp, but alive. She'd been alive through it all, and so were they. The sound of footsteps pulled her back. Ethan appeared in the doorway, still wearing the same wrinkled suit from the night before. His face looked different now, relieved but raw, as if he hadn't fully processed that his world hadn't shattered. She's asking for you, he said quietly. Claire wants to see you. Amara blinked, surprised. Me, he nodded. She won't stop talking about you. The woman with the yellow scarf. Her lips curved faintly. That scarf didn't survive the night. He smiled for the first time. Then I guess it did its job. They walked together through the corridor, past the hum of machines and the steady rhythm of beeping monitors. When they reached the private recovery room, Amara hesitated at the door. Claire lay in the hospital bed, pale but glowing, a tiny bundle swaddled in her arms. The baby's soft cries filled the room, fragile and perfect. When Claire saw Amara, her eyes brimmed with tears. You came, she whispered. You really came. Amara moved closer, unsure whether to smile or cry. I told you we'd make it, she said softly. Claire reached out her free hand, and Amara took it, gently. Her skin was warm this time, her pulse steady beneath her fingers. They told me everything, Claire said. How you didn't give up, how you stayed even when it was dangerous. I don't even have the words. You don't need any, Amara replied. You did the hardest part. Ethan stood by the foot of the bed, looking at the two women, the woman who had carried his child and the stranger who had risked everything to make sure they both survived. The depth of gratitude in his eyes was almost unbearable. She's healthy, the doctor had said earlier. A little early, but strong. And now, looking at the tiny infant squirming against her mother's chest, Amara felt something inside her loosen, something that had been wound too tight for too long. Claire smiled, glancing between them. We named her Hope, she said. Because that's what you gave us. Amara's breath caught. That's beautiful. Ethan turned toward the window, blinking rapidly as he tried to hide the emotion gathering in his throat. Hope Cole, he murmured. Perfect. Then he faced Amara again, his voice trembling. I don't think I'll ever be able to repay what you did. But I have to try. Amara shook her head, though she could see his sincerity. You don't have to repay me. I just did what I was trained to do. He frowned slightly. No, what you did was more than training. Training doesn't make someone crawl into a burning car. Compassion does. Bravery does. His words landed heavier than she expected. She wasn't used to being praised. Nurses rarely were. They were expected to save lives quietly, to hold fear and grief and never let it show. But now, hearing it spoken so simply, she felt tears rise to her eyes. If you really want to thank me, she said after a moment, then promise me something. Ethan's expression softened. Anything. Use what you have to help women like me, she said quietly. Black mothers, women in poor neighborhoods, those who don't have doctors watching over them. I see them every day, Too many of them don't make it. Not because they don't care, but because no one else does. For a moment, there was only silence. The gravity of her words filled the room. Claire's hand tightened around Amara's. Ethan looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, not just a rescuer, but a voice, a truth he'd never had to face. He nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. "You have my word," he said. "I'll do it, whatever it takes." Months later, the world would hear about it. The Amara Initiative, a nationwide program launched by the Cole Foundation to fund hospitals, maternal care centers, and medical scholarships for underrepresented nurses. But that morning, in that quiet room, it was just a promise shared between 3 people and one newborn who slept through it all. When Amara finally stepped outside, the sun had broken through the clouds, washing the city in gold. The streets still smelled of rain, the air crisp and new. She took a long breath, letting it fill her lungs. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel invisible. As she turned to leave, a nurse hurried after her with an envelope in hand. "This is for you," she said with a smile. Inside was a note written in careful, trembling handwriting. "Because of you, both of us lived. Our daughter's name is Hope. We'll never forget you." Amara folded the note gently, tucking it into her pocket as the morning sun warmed her skin. Then she smiled. A small, knowing smile that spoke of grace, strength, and the quiet power of doing the right thing when no one is watching. The world moved on around her, but somewhere in that hospital room, a baby named Hope was breathing because she hadn't looked away.